Hello, hello, and welcome back to college football video. Today, man, we have not the final because in about 5 or 6 weeks, I'm going to really recap and wrap it up and put a bow on it. But the last round for a while, so hold back your tears. Another one is coming, but this is going to be more of a recap, I guess, of every team's season where I think every team did well, could have did better. And I already reacted to the college football playoffs, the brackets out, all of that. I made a video, so I'm not going to be talking about the matchups too heavily. It's more so just talking about each team individually and how I think their regular season went. So thank you for watching. Let's get right into it. Sharing my screen right here. All right. So the number one team in the country has been my number one team in the country for a long, long time. I don't even know what week it was I made Oregon number one. I have to assume it was after they beat Ohio State because that is one of, if not the most impressive wins of the season. And Oregon in the Big Ten championship game beat Penn State. Now, I'll get to Penn State a little bit later. I thought they looked really good. Oregon, I do have some concerns here, and that is in their two biggest games of the season. Really, their three biggest games of the season. You think about it, Boise State, Ohio State, Penn State, that defense has looked bad in all three of those games. Now, for Ohio State, I'll give you a pass. Not being able to slow down Ginty, I'll give you a pass. But you're giving up 37 to Penn State? You let big game James Franklin score 37 points on you? That is very concerning. It really is. However, on the contrary, like has been the story for Oregon all year, they're unstoppable. And I don't know who the last team was to score 45 points on that Penn State defense. And listen, they don't have Manny Diaz anymore. It's not the same defense, but brother, this is the same defense that really slowed down and held Ohio State's offense in the mud. So I'm going to give Oregon's offense a lot of credit here. Dylan Gabriel, yet again, was flawless 300 yards and four touchdowns. They ran the ball extremely well. And remember, the run game was a problem for Oregon earlier in the season. That is no longer an issue. Jordan James has been very effective, and now they're getting Noah Whittington involved. I was wondering where he was. He was a really good role player for them in the past. He's back involved, getting the rock handed to him a lot. Now, Tez Johnson, I believe, broke the record for receiving yards in a Big Ten championship game. That he is a monster. When you put him in the slot, I don't know if there's a cornerback in the that can hang with him. He is an absolute monster. His combination with Dylan Gabriel, they're on the same page right now. The Oregon offense is the best in the country. Now, like I said, the defense, some areas are concerned. However, they got multiple exceptions that ended up winning them this game. They got one on the final drive on a go route on the right hand side of the field, and they got one, I believe, in Penn State's own like 30-yard line. Really bad throw by Drew Aller, but they got multiple interceptions. The yards allowed, they got ran all over. So if they have to play Tennessee, for example, in their first playoff game, that would be a really difficult matchup for them to slow down that Tennessee run game. But we'll get there when we get there. Number two, I have Georgia still. So Georgia actually moved all around. They started off as my number two. They finished as my number two. Funny enough. Um, let's talk specifically about the SEC game. I thought it was really strange how Georgia's offense yet again got off to a snail's pace of a start. You think all the games this season where Georgia's offense either got off to a slow start or just didn't get going at all. The Kentucky game, the Florida game, Alabama, Ole Miss, the Tennessee game, the first Texas game, this Texas game. It's like, brother, Georgia against Power Four opponents, the Georgia Tech game. Georgia against Power Four opponents is just not a good offense. It's like an objective fact. Now, they've played a lot of really good teams, but that does not discredit the fact that, especially in the first half, Carson Beck played the entire first half. On the very last play, they tried to throw a Hail Mary and he got hurt. I think he fucked something up in his elbow. So he actually will not be back for the foreseeable future. He's almost certainly going to miss the first playoff game. So that is massive implication here because I think I had Georgia going all the way and winning the national championship game. Now, if he's back for the national championship game, I think they still win. But if they have to go through, for example, a Notre Dame, then I think they would play the winner of like Boise State, Penn State, SMU. They'd beat them, whoever they have a quarterback. So their path is fairly easy to the national championship, but man, no Carson Beck really does make things interesting because their backup, Gunnar Stockton, he threw an absolutely terrible, one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen in my life. But with that being said, he showed a lot of heart. He showed a lot of toughness, and they were moving the ball with Gunnar Stockton better than they did with Carson Beck. Trevor Etienne has scored all five of Georgia's touchdowns against Texas this season. They do not have the answer to Trevor Etienne, but the offense overall still did not look good. But that does not matter because for whatever reason, Georgia's defense has the answer to Texas. Texas in 8 quarters plus in overtime could not move. Well, they could move the ball this game. They actually did not have much of a problem throwing the ball against Georgia. But brother, 6 sacks, 3 takeaways, 31 rush yards allowed. Texas's offensive line yet again got dominated. And I don't think they had Kelvin Banks, so they get a little bit of a pass. But for whatever reason, Steve Sarkisian's offenses are just soft, I guess. When they match up with a team like Georgia, they are outmatched. That is a fact. So it's pretty good. It's got to be a great feeling for Georgia. They win their SEC championship game, the most prestigious championship game that there is, the most important one that there is, and they get their first round bye. So we'll see what happens. That Carson Beck injury, I do think that they would beat whoever in their first game with Gunnar Stockton, but it will not be a blowout. I'm almost positive of that. Number 3, I got Notre Dame. Obviously, they are not in the conference. They do not play a conference championship game, but they are matched up with who is it? Indiana. They play on a Friday against Indiana. Let's talk about Notre Dame this season. I think this may have a case as the best defense in the country, and that's without Benjamin Morrison. He got hurt early on, and they have still looked very, very good. Now, their most recent game against USC gives me a lot of room for concern because they gave up like 35 points to USC with their backup quarterback. So that's concerning. It definitely is concerning it right there. Is Indiana better than USC? They're way better than USC. So Notre Dame, even though they're at home, that's a big difference here. They are at home. That should be very worrying to a Notre Dame fan. Now, Notre Dame, I think the game plan against Indiana will be the exact same as what Ohio State was, and that Notre Dame is a much more physical team, in my opinion, than Indiana. I think Indiana struggled. Their offensive line struggled mightily to protect the quarterback against Ohio State. If Notre Dame can turn up the pressure, I think you can completely shut down Indiana's explosive offense. That's my opinion. Now, Notre Dame offensively, they got Jeremiah Love at running back. He's been a big play machine for them. Riley Leonard listen, he's not had the most statistical, dominant season like he used to have at Duke, but he is playing really smart football. And Notre Dame, ever since their loss to NIU, has embraced what I asked them to embrace, which is just be an upgraded military school. Run the ball like nobody's business, play great defense. That's all Notre Dame has to do in the regular season. Now in the playoffs, we need to see a little bit more robust passing game, especially if you want to beat Georgia. But just for Indiana, Riley Leonard is going to have to make a few plays, a few third down conversions with his arm. Now, his legs are still going to be his most valuable weapon, in my opinion. I think Notre Dame won't have to throw third and longs hardly ever in this game. But can Riley Leonard, in a playoff scenario, convert those 3rd and 6s, those 3rd and 5s, those 4th and 2s? We will see. I think they will. I think he will. I have a lot of trust in Notre Dame, but when was the last time they won a playoff game? A pretty long time, I think. So we will see what happens there, but Notre Dame with a very good season. Number 4, I have Ohio State. They jump up one spot because Texas lost. The biggest question in my mind, listen, Ohio State was my number 1 team in the country going into the year. The talent on this roster has not changed. The question is, how much will the Michigan loss affect them? If it doesn't affect them, they have a strong case to be the number 2 team. If it does affect them, I think they'll lose in the first round. Without a shadow of a doubt, drawing Tennessee as your first opponent is the toughest matchup of anybody. Now, thankfully for Ohio State, you get Tennessee at home. But brother, you go from playing a team like Michigan, who runs the ball and play great defense and exposed you, to playing a team who runs the ball even better than Michigan and plays even better defense than Michigan. It's a tough matchup. Okay. But Ohio State, man, they have yet in a big game. You think of Michigan, you think of Nebraska. They kind of did against Oregon, but they didn't really do it against Penn State. They have yet in the last 2 months to really turn this offense into what it can be, or just airing it out. And Will Howard, he has made mistakes at each of their big games. He has made poor decisions, bad throws, this and that. But Ryan Day's job, it's not on the line, but his reputation is on the line. If he loses this game, everybody's done with him. Whether or not he gets fired, he will have nobody left in his corner. If he will basically be a dead man walking. He might not get fired. He might still be the coach. But in terms of support, in terms of the way people see you, Ryan Day's reputation is on the line in this game. So I feel like if he goes down, he has to die on his sword of being a versatile passing offense, right? Now, what Ohio State has as the advantage here, I assume would be the weather. I assume would be their elite defense, who has shut down everybody except Oregon. If their defense can get after Nico and shut down the Tennessee pass game, which has been extremely weak at times, I think they have a good chance. Okay. Now, your reward for winning a playoff game would be a rematch against Oregon. So, well, I'm not going to talk about their potential of winning the championship, but in terms of beating Tennessee, I still think Ohio State will get the. If I had to bet money, I would bet on Ohio State at home. Now let's move on to Tennessee. They had a bye week. They took care of business. Their last 2 games, I'll say this. I know that I've said their passing offense has struggled at times, but the last 2 games, one against the kindergarten school and one against Vanderbilt, their pass game has looked legit. Now, listen, Tennessee, my opinion of them in week 1 was spot on. They have not changed. They have been extremely consistent. The only thing that's fluctuated with Tennessee is how good Nico's looked, but that is directly correlated to the level of competition. Nico has played bad against good teams and great against terrible teams. It's very, I mean, it's pretty much cut and dry. You know what you're getting from him. Now, the question is, will he break that mold when they needed to? If Nico plays against Ohio State, like he played against Georgia, like he played against Florida, like he played against Arkansas or even Alabama, if he plays like that, Tennessee will lose to Ohio State. They need him to play above his means and not even play exceptional. Just make the throws. He misses throws constantly. Make the throws. They're going to have deep opportunities against this Ohio State secondary. Nico needs to put the ball where it needs to be. Now, the run game was exceptional. Dylan Sampson, one of the best backs in the country. People have not been able to stop him. Defensively, elite Tennessee defense. They had like 13 straight games of allowing under 20 points until Georgia broke it in Athens. Okay, so this Tennessee defense is exceptional. The run game is exceptional. It all comes down to Nico. It really does. Tennessee's defense and run game is good enough to win a national championship game. Their pass game needs to improve, and it needs to improve fast by the time they play in Columbus. Number 6, I have Texas. Sorry, it's really tough to judge Texas because they didn't pick their conference schedule. They did not choose to not play Ole Miss and Alabama and Missouri and who are the other good teams? They played A&M. So Texas did not choose the other 4 toughest teams in the SEC. All I can judge them on at the top level is how they looked against in this offense, for the most part, was shut down by Georgia in both games. Now, listen, Quinn Ewers looked a lot better in this game, but he still threw 2 picks. So it's like even when Quinn Ewers does good, you still can't say he had a good game because he threw 2 picks. Okay. I don't remember the third turnover. I think it was a fumble or something. They could not run the ball. This zone run scheme, this jet sweep, all this, Georgia just snuffs it out. They're too athletic. They're too strong. Texas didn't stand a chance. Like I said, the pass game was it. Two receivers over 110 yards. Isaiah Bond was not one of them. Listen, I have to say this real quick. I am completely done with Isaiah Bond as a prospect. You cannot be a projected first round pick and have like a combined 30 yards against Georgia in two games. You just can't do it. I have completely given up on him as a prospect. Defensively for Texas, yet again, another great performance from the Texas defense. Yet again, both games against Georgia, they got a combined 5 or 6 take is legit. They had Georgia's number, but they're all useless. So I feel bad for the Texas defense. They did an amazing job yet again, but their offense did not come to play. Thankfully for them, they played Clemson in the first round. I think they will stop Clemson. I think they will bounce back in a big way and just run Clemson out of the building. However, they now have to play an extra playoff game. They have to play who do they have to play? They have to play Arizona State. They get to play Arizona State. Texas has a really easy path to the college football semifinal, but they'll have to play either Tennessee, Ohio State, or Oregon. I don't think Texas is beating any of those teams since they're all above Texas in my rankings. But listen, Texas has a good opportunity to win multiple playoff games this year. So I think they will go 13-3 to end the season. Next up, we have Ole Miss. Listen, Ole Miss has not really done anything since their loss to Florida. They beat Mississippi State, but who cares? So Ole Miss, they are what they are. My for Ole Miss being this high in my personal rankings is that I've seen how good their best game was a bad game from their offense, and they dominated Georgia. Just think about that, what I just said. No team has dominated Georgia since Alabama did in the SEC championship game like 3 years ago. And Ole Miss did that while not playing good offensively. Think about that. So that's what they could be. I know this defense is elite. I don't care what anybody says. This is a top three defense in the country. This is the best front seven in the country. I said it. Okay. Their offense, man. The play calling, I hate it. I really hate their play calling. I think it's Charlie Weiss is the OC. I just despise him. Jackson Dart, he's like a sixth-year starter, but they get the line in 10 seconds because I guess he doesn't know how to read a defense. The only explanation that I can think of for sprinting the line, going no huddle every single play, is because you don't know how to read a defense. What is the other explanation? You're trying to catch the defense off guard? There is no catching them off guard. They know what's coming. I hate that from Ole Miss. Tennessee does it as well. Ugh. But Ole Miss, man, like I said, at times the offense is unstoppable. The defense is exceptional, but they have three razor close losses to SEC teams. Them are ranked, by the way. Ole Miss's losses are terrible. They have lost to three teams. My argument is this: beat anybody. I know that for a fact. They could dominate anybody, but they also could lose to anybody. So not a G5 or a FCS team, but any good Power Four team could beat Ole Miss, but they could absolutely dominate anybody. So I have no idea. They are the most wild card team in the country, in my opinion. But yeah, I know just based off how good they could be, I have them at number 7. Number 8, I have Alabama. Yeah, it comes down to this. You're going to look at all the teams below Alabama. Let's just list them off here. Who would be favored? Neutral site, Alabama, SMU, Alabama. Who would be favored? Neutral site, Alabama versus Clemson, Alabama. Who would be favored? Neutral site, Alabama versus Indiana, Alabama. Alabama versus Penn State, Alabama. It's just, listen, that does not mean they deserve to get into the playoffs. I'm happy that they did not get into the playoff. They did not deserve to. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm talking about for my personal rankings, they would be favored on a neutral site against anybody below them. That does not mean they beat them because they were also favored against Vanderbilt and they were also favored against Oklahoma. So they absolutely could lose to any of these teams below them. But if I had to bet my life savings on it, I would pick Alabama to beat any of these teams below them. I would not feel good about it. Don't get me wrong, but Alabama still, listen, this offense has really let Jalen Milroe down. They don't have a single running back or receiver or tight end who will be drafted in the NFL draft this year. None. Not a single one. But people want to blame Jalen Milroe for this offense and how bad it is. It is truly remarkable to me. Defensively, it was the worst Alabama defense in a while. It felt like, at least, but they still had 27 takeaways. They only allowed 17 points per game, but they got dominated by Vanderbilt. What else were their losses? They let Oklahoma run for like 300 yards. Georgia had like 800 yards of offense in the second half. So Alabama, I mean, listen, I don't know. Alabama, I did predict them to go 9-3. I absolutely did predict that. So that's a great pick by me. But still, it's just frustrating with Alabama because yet again, like it's the same with Ole Miss. You see them dominate Missouri and you see them dominate Georgia for the first half, and you know how good they can look, but there's no consistency from game to game. You don't know what version of Alabama you're going to see. So I have them down here at number 8. Very disappointing season from them. Number 9, I have SMU. They lost to Clemson. Razor. Let's get into the game here. They started off completely disastrous. I think they went down 21-0 to Clemson in the first 10 minutes. Okay. I thought the game was over. I'm sure Clemson thought the game was over. However, SMU was not built like that. SMU proved after that fact that they are not some fraudulent former G5 fluke team. They came all the way back. They were down 17 points in the fourth quarter, and they tied the game. However, their defense could not hold Clemson to force overtime. Clemson drove down the field, and I think they made either a 54 or a 56-yard field goal. It was insane. Clemson earned the win, but and the committee thinks SMU's the better team. Which I think SMU wins that game 7 out of 10 times. They just got literally a disastrous start. I think the team after that 21-0 start was the real version of SMU. Because what they outscored Clemson 31-13 after that. But listen, the point is they lost and they made the mistakes to lose. Kevin Jennings, I think he's a true sophomore, had possibly the best game I've ever seen a quarterback have against the Clemson defense. He was absolutely electric in that game. Exceeded all of my expectations. They ran the ball on Clemson. Brashard Smith proved he's a very good player, possibly the best running back in the ACC besides Amarion Hampton. Defensively, they did not get a takeaway. The SMU defense let me down this game. It really did. They lost a turnover battle 2-0. That ended up really being the deciding factor in this game. They could not force a turnover of the Clemson offense, and that's what lost them the game. And when they had to hold Clemson when they needed it most at the very end of the game, they could not do it. So SMU, they play Penn State. And if it was neutral site, I would pick SMU. But unfortunately, it is in Happy Valley. So I think Penn State will get the job done there. But it certainly will not be easy. I can promise you that. Number 10, I have Miami. Listen. Miami. Unfortunately, we really didn't get to see Miami against the top-level team this year. They played Florida, and they played Georgia Tech and Syracuse. They played some good teams. But we didn't get to see Miami against another top 10, top 15, top 20 team. And that is a tragedy. We did not get to see Cam Ward against another great team. And that really does hurt. Because I guarantee you all these guys are going to be opting out, man. They should at least. Maybe guys like Xavier Restrepo will play, but Cam Ward, there is no reason for him to play in this goddamn bowl game. But yeah. Miami's defense, truly devastatingly terrible. I mean, they had one game. It started off well, is the crazy part. Like their first 4 games, it looked good. But as soon as they got into conference play, brother, it was terrible. And down the stretch, right? They had a great game against Wake Forest, and it made me think, like, hold on, did they figure something out? Is this a new Miami defense? Of course not. They got fucking stomped by Syracuse. So yeah, they were not revamped, they were not reformed. It was still the same shit defense in the final game of the season. Cost them the spot in the playoffs. Truly devastating. It's the best offense in the country. Man, can you imagine the matchups? Oh my God, Miami versus Oregon, Miami versus Texas, Miami versus goddamn even Indiana would have been a great game. Miami versus fucking who else? Miami versus Boise State, Miami versus SMU. There would have been so many great matchups that we were robbed of because Miami's defense fucking sucks. It's terrible, terrible, truly devastating. So Miami is at number 10 because their offense could score 40 points on anybody, but their defense could give up 60 points to anybody. So it's a sad thing. Number 11, I have Indiana. They have not really changed for me in the last several weeks. Um, I think they'll lose in round one to Notre Dame. I just think the biggest problem is this offensive line. I think the run game is fine. I think the running backs are good. I think the quarterbacks are good. I like the receivers, especially Elijah Surratt. But I've seen them in one massive game this year, right? And their offensive line could not protect Curtis Rourke. That's the biggest problem for me. I don't have a problem with any of the personnel, any of the coaching. It's simply that offensive line. I saw what it looked like against a good team, and it was terrible. The defense has played really good this season, really good. They slowed down Ohio State for large parts of that game, but still did not matter. They gave up like 38 points, whatever it was. Um, Notre Dame, I don't think Notre Dame will score 30 points. I think this will be like a 27 to 17 type game. So but yeah, I really don't think Indiana has much of a chance. But if they won, that would be truly shocking. That would surprise me a lot. Number 12, I have South Carolina. By the way, a great season for Indiana, regardless. Number 12, I have South Carolina. What a story this has been the last 6 or so weeks, truly just turning everything around. Lenoris Sellers, this guy, man, what he did in that game against Clemson, I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. I'm talking about plays that are only possible in college football. Lenore Sellers had like 4 or 5 of those against Clemson. It was ridiculous. They ran the ball very well this season. It's good to see Rocket Sanders have a bounce back year. He was so good with Arkansas early on in his career, and now he put on the pounds. He looks huge, and he had a bounce back year with South Carolina this year. The defense, though, is the story. 40 sacks. Guys like Kyle Kennard and what's the other guy's name? Shamar Stewart, I think is his name. Really good players on this defensive line. 18 points per game allowed. They have a DB as well, who I think is going to be a first or second round pick. So South Carolina, truly an A+ season. They didn't get picked to the playoffs, but man, they were close. You could make the argument if they didn't get robbed against LSU, they probably should have been in the playoffs. They would have been in the playoffs. But man, South Carolina, what a great year. And I mean, things are looking up. You're probably going to get a lot of transfers into there, and they might be a powerhouse next year in the SEC. So keep an eye on them. Number 13, I got Clemson. Obviously, they won their ACC championship game. I talked about the game already, but Clemson's run game really wasn't going. So we had possibly Cade Klubnik's best performance of his career. I'm talking about like in a big game setting. Cade Klubnik proved that he is not the same guy he was last year. He has grown as a player, and he is now a really good college quarterback. He proved that this game. And by the way, Bryant Wesco, I talked about this horrible receiving core. It's starting to get some players in there. Antonio Williams, Bryant Wesco, he had this massive game. The Clemson offense is starting to evolve and improve. And defensively, they did not do a good job, but they got enough takeaways. They made enough plays to win this game. So Clemson, I've talked a lot of shit about Clemson over the course of this channel, but this is the best they've been. This moment right here for Clemson, right now, the past 2 weeks, has been the height of the Clemson program. So shout out to them since I've started watching college football, at least. So number 14, I got Penn State. Even when they play good, they lose. It's so funny, man. Big game James. I've been following college football for about 3 years. I have never seen the man win a big game. Let's just run through them real quickly off the top of my head. Big Ten championship game against Oregon. Regular season this season against Ohio State. Bowl game last year against Ole Miss. Regular season last year against Michigan. Regular season last year against Ohio State. Fucking regular season the year before against Ohio State. It's just no matter what happens. James Franklin will find a way to lose the big game. A lot of people are saying this is the best game of his career. This is the best he's ever looked. And still, he threw two picks that lost him the game. The run game was extremely impressive. Okay, they ran the ball down Oregon's throat. I was not expecting that. I didn't think that Oregon's defense was capable of looking that bad in terms of stuffing the run. But Penn State, they ran all over them. So credit where credit is due. Tyler Warren, Nick Singleton, big games from them. But it didn't matter because even when the Penn State offense is playing great, the defense gives up nearly 500 yards with zero takeaways. The Penn State defense, this was the worst I've ever seen from them, ever, ever. Could not stop Oregon. So the argument is very simple. The reason I have Penn State at 14 is because all of these games right here, if they played any of these teams, it would be considered a big game and they would probably lose. Now, they play SMU at home. It's a big game, but they have a major talent advantage and they're at home. So I think they're probably going to win that game. And James Franklin is going to get a lot of false credit for this season. But honestly, this was not a good season for Penn State. I'll make a whole video later on about Penn State, but brother, if they lose to SMU, that would be so fucking funny. I can't even put it into words. Number 15, I got Arizona State. They beat Iowa State. They are on fire the last couple months, really. Sam Leavitt, the quarterback, in his last like 7 games has been exceptional. The run game is amazing, but brother, this man, Cam Scatterboo, I watched this game. Cam Scatterboo had one of the greatest games I've ever seen on live television. They could not tackle this man. 18 touches for 208 yards. What is that? That's like 12 yards per touch or 11 yards per touch. Absolutely insane. Had 3 touchdowns. Poor old Iowa State. It looked like it was going to be a brother. They could not stop Cam Scatterboo. And the defense started taking the ball away from Iowa State. So really a great performance from Arizona State. They get their first round bye, and their reward is getting to play Texas. So yikes. But hey, A+ season from Arizona State. Doesn't matter what happens in the playoffs. And these are my first 3 teams out, if you will. I just wanted to include, I dropped it from 18 to 15, but I don't know, 15 just seemed like a better number. But these are my first 3 out. Colorado, Boise State, Army, all had great seasons. All, I think, Boise obviously deserves their spot in the playoffs under the current system. But yeah, so those are my first 3 out. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, and I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.